All right, so we're going to get right into it. Get started right away. First of all, thank everybody for coming. Some of you had no choice. This is your class. Thank you for not skipping class. How about that? Today, we have three poets who are going to read their work. Very special day. Actually, we have Matthew Griffiths, Jonathan Gilliam, and Cathy Linh Che. Actually, if you know Matthew, he's a professor here in physics, right? Yeah. Um, and Matthew gave me Jonathan's book one day and just slid it to me. Check this out. And it took me a while to get to it, but then when I did get to his book, I knew I wanted to come and read, and I really respected the work. And so, for me, that's always the most important. So we definitely want to thank Jonathan for coming. So we'll get right into the bios, and we'll have each reader read, and they know their times, and we'll just go right through it. So Matthew Griffiths was a bad at English. He failed his ordinary level in spoken English. He was placed into extra English. This was during the punk-fueled 70s in suburban London. While refusing to do assigned homework, enough mathematics and physics stuck that he could go to university. He learned to write when editing the UK design guidance for offshore structures. He then took up a poetry writing residency at the Vermont Studio Center, to be close to an American artist, Elizabeth Gourlay. Really close. He writes in his spare time. And he has nearly finished co-authoring a book, Tricking the Impossible with Penny Rimbaud. Jonathan Gilman, is the head of the theater department at the Greater Hartford Academy of the Arts, a public magnet high school, and the director of Looking In Theater, a teen interactive social issue theater group. In addition to poetry, he also writes fiction, nonfiction plays, and children's stories. My Father Humming, his most recent book, deals with his father's decline with Alzheimer's, his mother's often heroic caretaking, and his acceptance of his father, both who had been and who was becoming. Although dealing with a difficult topic, it is a positive book full of love, humor, and healing. For it, Jonathan was one of 6 finalists for the 2014 Patterson Poetry Prize, which is definitely a huge honor. And we have Cathy Linh Che, who is the author of Split, which comes from Alice James. Was that did that win a prize? Would that win the Beatrice Hawley? Where's the Kundiman Poetry Prize. And I want her to let's talk about Kundiman when she comes up. Kundiman is an organization that cultures Asian American writers or writers of Asian descent. A Vietnamese American author from Los Angeles, she has received awards from Poets and Writers, Poets House, and the Jerome Foundation. Okay, she lives in Brooklyn. So first up, Matthew Griffiths. Come on up, man.
Okay. Thank you, Randall. Can people hear me? This is at the back. Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm not quite sure which I'll use. This one is in honor of the time of year that we have now, and it's called To Screech of Boiling Sap Would Be to Rip Us Under the Veriness. On a morning of ambiguity, Floth shimmed, the shreen with mumble doubledy. Moo, floth, dink, dink, moo, floth. Unshickering unneth the floth, the schloth punder pebbled and path. Oh, abling, warbricked in ulickshisht, upling plushly. On moss in plubles, ashly sore bending, unnamed by use. Nip, the gal gong ping, the jab a tin joy, gal hearthing twixt twigs of brute ties. Wallow wirral, lop, ding dow mint in blorient pashish. So that's for boiling sap if you haven't done it yourselves, maple syrup sap. Then Tricking the Impossible, the book coming out with Penny Rimbaud, out of London, the punk poet who was on campus a couple of years ago with Crass, from Crass. This is Tricking the Impossible, and this gives an idea of what it's about. Consciously peeling back layers, conceit after conceit reveals more conceits. Instead of peeling, Wittgenstein sucked, dissolving disagreements. Attacking humbug, angry punk spit, tastes sweet. Ex-logical positivist conceives poetry as language traction. Each epiphany, a whole petal plucked. Each petal a punk rips is pleasure to Shiva. And then the book is about ripping apart things that have been imposed on us from outside. So here's one on point of view. Meanwhile, I watched the film, projected in Goethe, enjoying the in-out of the foregoing, therefore, back and forth, after image, held, stayed, frosted, frozen for a duration, and there it is in mind as colour and tone, light and sound, made to be the main maintenance of my attentive mind. The mental image flows slowly, flowing by. In one mental image, my father has a camera through which I learned to see. Look, lenses. My father and I communicated. This has a different focal length. We call it a 50 millimeter. Thus I was made aware of myself, watching myself, playing with a way to change the world between standard, telephoto, and wide angle. My idea of myself was directed by my father. Get some perspective, stand back, distance yourself. I think that he wanted me to see from his point of view. I did in the 1970s with a child's single lens reflex. I became a vehicle for the contrivance of a single point of view. In space and time, my mirror went up and down, my shutter blinked, my mirror neurons made me become a single lens reflex. Boy, I was fast. They called me Fly. With clenched fists straight out above my head, I would lie and fly. Visiting only as Peter Pan can, every wish-fulfilling window in my town, my road, my roaming host, I would return to my room, this room in which a dilettante lifted off to infiltrate and defenestrate the neighborhood. Pretty good trick if you're a fly. Take a time of idle imagination and try. This is about manipulation. It is said that the 130 millimeter lens does not overemphasize proximal objects. Some physics. Fashion photographers therefore proffer longer lenses. Some paparazzi have a very long reach. Picture Princess Di. Our mind's eye zooms in on an Arab in a tunnel of unacceptable love. Crunch. I loved Lady Di. This is against self-consciousness. Speed and smell, the vague build-up of hindsight. Past paths fly. With no first or third person's eye, am the one point in a world where all else is scintillating kaleidoscopic. The gentle dawn of what might not amount to consciousness. It feels good to me, it feels like me, the pleasant waft, the tasty juice, decay, translucent grey flesh, the exquisite urge to purge, a spot and lay some eggs, all of me and of my self-necessity. Gently flows the future, subtle flows the past. Risen beyond my maggot scum, I am clearly, vaguely myself. This is one about protest. Well, nothing really. This little action of mine is a big act of pilgrimage for me. Through it, I imagine that I am changing the world. Shit, I just snapped Jesus' little arm. There goes another scriptural bit of fortune-telling, because Jesus was a Sagittarius. He was born on Christmas Day, and his fate will be greatly influenced by meeting a nice girl called Mary. He also has a long lifeline, perhaps 75 centimeters. He would have 5 children and an issue with his biological mother and a different issue with his brother lover. My little act of prying my little man off his sticks did much more than all my protesting the Iraq War, and what a stupid war that was. I drew a little cartoon of Bush and Blair, both saying that they believed the other one's intelligence. And I did go with my wife to protest on the streets of Manhattan. What a disappointment that was. Graciously and with no fuss, we were led like lambs into some slaughter pen, a picket enclosure in the middle of an avenue. Cold and crammed into those open cattle cars, we stood together listening to little faint rebroadcast of a speech coming and going from some distant device, the voice, it seems, from an even further distant speaker. What was being said? It sounded like the names of the stations announced on the track to Auschwitz. Whisper, whisper, they did not care. Futile I was in passively standing. One more they did not mind, one more Billy against the senseless killings. So now I return to King's prophetic call. All out rousing all of us to actions for all out freedoms. What act can bring us to a new land that he foresaw? Actions, massive actions, acts on the ground. I will again place my thumb and mirror the maker of Jesus. In the name of action, I will sensuously feel about in the hollow where Jesus' tummy should be. In the commodification of revolution, they sell little Jesus figurines, nothing worn under the kilt. But in other bait shops, they sell live maggots. We, the consumer of commodities, can go for the maggots, buried with Jesus, and on the third day let freedom flies. It is only dreaming to think that we amount to more than flies. This is on waking. Not nothing, yet utterly incapable of illusionary formations, seeth alchemically, children running ungrammatic, free in an ungod and pre-speak age, free wish, indistinguishable fempt. We dosh lank, and she welched formulaic, spume and lake, making mountains of little frizzles, the surface of which is inaudacious, a simple blithering sheen, visited and hanging reverberant on optical transcendence, proof of consciousness. We are born of mind, of spirit, childra thing. And this is for math. It's called On Not Math. Snapperjack prattle. Rapunzel, Rapunzel, crack tooth, crunch, the tooth fairy, break dance, chance on your hard candy mint, pull a hard right conviction in hard tone on the one pure aesthetic, the absolute known, eternal catechism, Russell, a Christian reborn in which we have had less certainty than that crack-addicted mathematician. On science, milligram by milligram, each drink of the flamingo pink Kool-Aid is chilled and sent by telegram, giving us all the tiny pinnacles of synthetic knowledge, what Galileo is got on going about, all tick, tick and gig, gig, rigs set, rigs rigged, reefed and square knotted, industry all electric humming with Gilbert's closed magnetic and Garibaldi's hard tack and harder flies, Thompson's eviscerated flight path, electronic arcs casting the shadow of a flat iron cross in a round and atomic flask. And this is with respect to Wittgenstein. Blake and Burns write only, it seems, what is incomplete. We write only what cannot even be said. And on Dada, Dada, father poet, stop here if you wish to rest your eyes, for what is written is farce only. It is a type of logic that is not quite right. Joke, a alchemical blue-grey whale of blowhole smoke. There are so many things you might wish to eat, but you may not, for it is not a pipe. Okay.
Okay. Hi. As he said, the book I wrote, with My Father Humming, was about my father. My father was a classically trained pianist. He had a certificate from Juilliard. He was also a nationally known mathematician. He had a brilliant mind. And by the time he died 6 years ago with Alzheimer's, there wasn't a whole lot left of the person he had been. I started writing these not even as poems, more as journal entries to try to figure out what was going on. Is the same person still there and we just can't figure out how to get him? Or is he really just changed in some kind of way? And what I discovered gradually is that even though he changed, but he was still there. He stopped speaking a lot, but touch was still really important. And because he grew up with music, music was really important. And the title poem, which I'll read later, comes from when he looked like he was pretty far gone. I think somebody walking in and looking at him would say, oh, there's not much left of that person. But at one point, I was playing a piece on his piano, and he started humming along with me. So even at this advanced state of decline, he could still make art. He could still make music. So he still was what we define, I think, as a human being, and that was really important for me. And in writing these, I thought I was telling my story, my mother's story, my father's story. And then when I started reading them in public, I discovered that there were a lot of people who'd had the same. Many or most of us have somebody close to us who've lost for Alzheimer's or dementia or cancer or whatever. So it seemed to be telling the story of a lot of different people. And this book is sort of an arc. It's my journey basically to acceptance of him as he goes through his decline and then his death. So this is My Father Humming. A house with music in it. You step into the house and hear the music. Stop, breath held. Lower the groceries to the floor, hoping the bag won't crinkle. And stand, eyes shut, taken so far from sounds of the world outside, as if it doesn't exist. There is only in the other room, piano, player, and the music, passing through your pores, penetrating your heart. Lodging there, so deep, it's hard to imagine a time it wasn't there. Or there might come another when you walk into nothing. His hands not on the keys, no magic in his fingers. Vibration of the twisted strands of metal, gone. The silence emptier for what it used to hold. This book is in 3 parts. The first part, which is fairly short, is just sort of about my father and me. The second part, which is by far the longest, is about his decline. And then the third part, which is fairly short, is about after he's died. So the first couple are from the first part. My father, humming. I don't know how you felt when you played, head bent as if inside the notes. I do know you used to hum, accompanying yourself, maybe not aware. One couldn't tell from listening to you drone what piece it was, all tuneless and the same, immersed so far, like what they say about the drowned, becoming one with water. A house with music in it. 2. I'm 12, coming home with friends, bounding up onto the porch in the Indiana summer afternoon. Crickets and cicadas making a loud whirring with their wings. Sweat sticking to forehead, shirt, and neck. Baseball glove under my arm. I stop when I hear the piano from inside. Turn toward my friends. Shake my head. Pull open the door. Shut it behind me without a click. Step into the cool dark of the house. My father at the piano straight ahead, humming as he plays. Every now and then a damn it as he misses a note. He doesn't pause, doesn't look up, doesn't change his rhythm as I tiptoe through. Past the table covered with his important work. The air conditioner behind it, humming its own tune. I climb the stairs, trying to avoid the ones that creak. The music, something of Beethoven, loud and passionate, follows me down the hall to the door of my room. I step inside, shut it out, open the windows, toss my mitt aside, turn on the radio, smile a little at Chuck Berry singing, "Roll over, Beethoven," flop down on the bed, pull out my toy baseball game, and go on being 12 in nowhere, Indiana, on a sticky summer afternoon. These next ones are all from the middle section. Killing time. 6 months after Yowling, I was trying to kill him, talking on the phone while driving, and I so angry I wouldn't talk for months. My father has 4 bypasses. I visit in the hospital. There he is, lying on his back, eyes shut, mouth open. A frailer version of the man who always had to do everything himself, till fainting the week before. He's not the same, will never be again. Can't dress himself, walk 15 feet, needs help getting in and out of bed. He's changed, too, in how he is. For the first time knows, vitamins or quackeries, it'll happen to him, too. He's kinder now, remembering me young, how sweet I was at 3, at 4, at 5. New stories every day, repeated many times, as if some part did notice and forgot, till now. I sit and watch this man, so different from before, and all my anger goes. Down the stairs. My father's going downstairs to bed, my mother helping. It looks like a disaster waiting to happen, tied together by a rope, running from waist to waist, like the invisible tether which has bound them for so long, neither can remember a time before when they were free to fall on their own, not pull the other with them. She's done this since the time he took a tumble, and it was hours before she got him up. At each step, his foot searches the air for the one below. My mother above, waiting, after he stood not moving for a while, reminding him, "You're going down the stairs, the right foot next. At the landing, there's a chair he sits on." Shuts his eyes. She rouses him with, "Only 9 more to go," puts her arm under his, tries to lift him. For a moment, it's not clear if he will make it. "You have to help me here," she says. "I can't do this by myself." And when he stands, points him down the stairs, puts his hand on the railing, steps back till the rope is taut between them, and on they go. Love notes. She comes home from a morning out, finds on the kitchen counter a note in his shaky hand. "I love you." Her full name on the line below, and beneath that, taking up half the page, his name signed, first and last, as if he was 16, wanting to let the world know what he'd discovered and couldn't keep secret. She finds the same note all over the house, on the bathroom counter, the dining room table, one beside him in the study where he sits at the computer. She comes up behind him, puts her arms around his shoulder, slides her cheek next to his. "I love you too," saying his name first and last, and nuzzling his ear, smiles as she adds her own, the one her parents gave her and the one they've shared for all these years. He turns his head toward her. In his look, she sees he doesn't know what she's talking about. She picks the note up that sits beside him, kisses it, holds it in front for him to see. Still no response, his face as blank as the computer screen he's been staring at. Down the stairs 3. It happens every night, my mother following my father down the stairs, not accepting help. I'd get used to it, she says, and then when you're not here. Today, too, tied together by a rope that runs from waist to waist. And when they reach the bottom, her reward, after she changes his diaper, cleans him up, puts on his pajamas, tucks him into bed, and he sleeps there 16 hours, to do it again in the morning. Till the time, his energy used up, he collapses, slides out of the chair, lies there on the landing, a turtle on its back. Nothing she does can make him move. She has to call 911, have the firemen, robust young men, carry him upstairs. After that, he doesn't seem to notice that where she leads him doesn't involve ropes. The invisible tether, as strong as ever, guiding him to a bed he won't get up from. My father had a rather quirky sense of humor, and even as he declined, I think it still was there, and I think that's what's going on in this one. At home, the fireman, standing on the landing in their home in Austin, Texas, towers over my father, lying on his back, looks down and asks, "Where are you, sir?" My father answers, "New York City," and laughs. The fireman repeats, a little louder, "Do you know where you are, sir?" My father answers, a little louder, "Yes, New York City," and laughs a little louder. My mother smiles at the fireman. He does this sometimes. Says to my father, "You know where we are, at home in Austin," while he keeps staring up past both and smiling as if at a memory of him, a boy, lying on the sidewalk, looking up at the tall buildings of New York City. Anniversary. She goes into the bed. Start off. She goes into the room, sits beside the bed, takes his hand. "You know what today is?" she asks the body that does not respond. "Our anniversary. It's a big one. 70. She stops, remembering the year before, going out, he in his chair, complaining about the food. He couldn't have been too badly off. Lifting him into it, out of it, how hard that was, how much he had declined. No inkling then. She puts it out of mind. Some of them were difficult. You weren't always the easiest. But for better or for worse. And she thinks, but does not say. Squeeze once, if you can hear me. A second time, if you still love me. Too much to ask, not daring to hope or be disappointed. Better to live with memory, lapsing into silence, following her thoughts. And then, when lost in them, feeling pressure on her fingers, a second time as well. She squeezes back once, twice, and waits. Nothing more. On his face, no change, eyes shut as always. And as the day settles into night, longest of the year, she stays, hands joined with his in silence, while the room gets dark so slowly, as if the light is being exhaled out, till all she sees, a shadow where the window is, outline of his body on the bed. The only sounds, their breathing, rising, falling, and so faint she almost cannot hear, but knows it still is there, the beating of their hearts. As I said, my father went to Juilliard and did classical music, especially Bach and Beethoven. And I grew up hearing it. My mother was a music major in college, and I was taught absolutely no music. And there are two possibilities. One is I played something really early, and it was so bad, they said, no, we're not going to do this. But I think the real one was that when my father was 7 and his younger brother was 5, they were in a competition at Carnegie Hall. And 5 and 7-year-olds don't say, Mom, I want to be in a competition. They say, can I go play? And I think he was trying to give me a childhood that he didn't get to have. But as an adult, I taught myself to play because I'd heard this music growing up. And I play a lot of the same, I played the same music, I played the same notes, but I played them very differently. And in this particular one, my father had a huge music room, and I'm in the piano in his room, and at the end he was staying in the study, which is like over to the right. And in between there's an open window. And on the wall between them, there's a program of him playing the same piece when he was 19, so he knew this piece really well. And to give an example of how wrong my playing was, when he plays it the correct way, it's 4.5 minutes, and when I play it, it takes 23 minutes. It's the same piece of music, but it's, you know, I'm not adding notes, I'm not subtracting notes, I'm just doing it. It's different music, it's my interpretation. So that's what's going on in this. My father humming, too. I'm at my father's piano, playing a piece he used to play, but not the way he played it. Not, he's sure, the way Herr Beethoven intended. He's hearing it, not sleeping as he often is, and he's not happy with it. Before, he would have yelled out, stop, or booed or yelled, you're trying to kill me. He's not saying much these days. Before I've played 5 notes, he's choking, loud and drastic. Stop now, I think. Call 911. Then rush up. See what I can do. The caretaker is there. She's raised the bed. He's sitting upright. Nothing else to do. Let him work it through. I keep playing. The choking gets louder, more alarming, a rattle in the throat, as if this is the end. My stomach tightens, but I don't stop. And this goes on a while. Duet for a son playing on his father's piano while his father gasps his last. But then the choking lets up, gets quieter, changes to a cough, more like the clearing of a throat, and stops. He's still, and I'm still playing. I take a breath, relax. As I go on, I hear, so faint at first, I'm not sure what I'm hearing. He's humming, tunelessly, along with me, the way he used to when he was playing. It gets stronger, surer, there's no mistaking it. And we go on like this, the two of us, making music until the piece is done. Leave taking. You've buried both your parents. Your mother like this, slowly in a home. Brother younger than you, choosing to starve. So many dear close friends. You've loved to have him for so long, but you have said goodbye to the person he once was, the one you shared so much with. By now, words gone, laughter, memory, as far as you can tell. And less like a bird trapped in a house, he's in there still, wings banging against the panes. Open all the doors, the windows, leave them wide. He goes on flapping, trying to get out. And these last few are from the final section after he's died. Memorial service. At the memorial service, it's my father they're talking about. His name that's said over and over. But it's me I'm hearing, as if I'm the one being buried here. No one else left between me and the void. I'm next. There's no escaping it. And after I have spoken, and it is done, it's my 2 sons who come up to me. And without a word, first one and then the other, hug and hug. Until I know, they know about the death of fathers, mine and theirs, their children's too, saying to me now what they won't be able to when our turns come. final instructions. When I die, don't bury me, but burn me down till all that's left is dust. Set aside a handful to mix with yours when you have moved on too. And of the rest, take me to the water where I have played and splashed and laughed. Go out on it till all you see is blue and green. Commend me to the wind that holds the spirit. And as you feel it touch your face, toss this little that remains gently up into it to carry where it will, and be content, knowing I'm at peace. And the last one is called Endnotes. I sit down at my father's piano. The first slow notes of Beethoven's Moonlight echo in the room till the air's alive with them, striking to the bottom of the heart and lower, down to the core. Here, in this room, through these keys, these notes, these fingers, and this heart, what he gave me years ago, I now give back to him. And if I listen as I play, I still can hear his spirit humming loud and clear. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for being here. So I'm going to read some poems. First of all, thank you, Randall, for inviting me, and then thank y'all for being here. So what started me on poetry in the first place was, my parents' stories of the Vietnam War. They immigrated from Vietnam about 40 years ago, and they were boat people, so they left Vietnam and on a boat for 8 days and ended up in the Philippines and lived in a refugee camp there for about a year. And then they were hired as extras to be in an American film about the Vietnam War called Apocalypse Now. So they played extras, playing not only themselves, but people they were running from. So it's a very interesting thing that I'm currently working on. I'm interviewing my parents, and yeah, that's like the face that I give to my parents. And no, it's okay. And for them, they're very funny about it. They're like, "What do you mean? We were bored. We had no money. This is great. It was an adventure. It was." I'm like, but you were put back into something that resembled war. They're like, "Meh, I bought a watch." Like. So I think what first brought me to poetry was my parents' stories and the desire to recover them, because I think the narrative of the Vietnam War had, for me growing up, been more about like an American perspective, GIs, and kind of the films were, more about the soldiers, but not about people like my parents. So, all right, I'm gonna do this. So I'm going to read 2 poems, and they're more sort of about my mom, a little bit about the war, but sort of like the loss that she felt, and kind of passed down to me. So, my mother still dreams of the war. Her great uncle was kidnapped when she was 5, and the rumors of the Viet Cong prevent her from ever returning to that place where the wraiths rose from the paddies as she walked alone to school. In sleep, she can't erase her great uncle's image, his kind eyes and hair cropped close. In the summer, soldiers hid in the ditch just outside her home. She knew them from their distinct smell. Mùi mì, she called it, laughing. That American scent of mosquito repellent and unbathed skin that she described as the smell of something burning. She was 13 when the soldiers touched her hair, clipped the strands between their fingers as if to cut them, and perhaps some piece of her too. Soon after, a village girl was raped by a soldier in a dried out gully. She was airlifted to the field hospital. My mother doesn't say it could have been me, but instead, the girl lived and could never marry. So what's really interesting about me writing this book is that, my parents don't really speak English, so I do a lot of, they speak English a little bit, but, most of the stories are in Vietnamese, and I'm sort of writing them out in the language that I think. My first language was Vietnamese, but it's not, I only use it when talking to my parents, really. So to think about, who am I as a Vietnamese American? So thinking about, what is our participation in the wars abroad currently as an American, but also as this, other person who came from a legacy of this war. So that's something I'm thinking about. Has nothing to do with the next poem, but so the next poem is a little bit. I've been thinking about mythologies, and it was actually after a writing prompt. It's based upon the myth of Persephone and Demeter, a Greek myth where Demeter is the goddess of the earth. Persephone is stolen away; it's her daughter, and Demeter grieves, so then everything starts dying. It becomes winter, and the prompt was think about your parents' grief and describe it. So for me, this was a scene of watching my mother, who had not lived with her mother since she was 13, really, because of that that last poem, because American troops came to her village and it was no longer safe for her to be there, so she was separated. And then she immigrated to the US, so really it was a long separation. So this is my mother upon hearing news of her mother's death. She opened her mouth, and a moose came out, a donkey and an ox out of her mouth, years of animal grief. I led her to the bed. She held my hand and followed. She said, "Jet Roy," and like that, the cord was cut, the thread snapped, and the cable that tied my mother to her mother broke. And now her eyes red as a market fish, and now she dropped like laundry on the bed. The furniture moved toward her. The kitchen knives and spoons, the vibrating spoons, they dragged the tablecloth, the corner tilting in, her mouth a sinkhole. She wanted all of it. The house and the car too, and the flowers she planted, narcissus and huamai, which cracked open each spring. The sky, she brought it low, until the air was hot and wet and broke into a rain. The torrents like iron ropes you could climb up, only I couldn't. I was drowning in it. I was swirled in. I leapt into her mouth, her throat, her gut, and stayed inside with the remnants of my former life. I ate the food she ate and drank the milk she drank. I grew until I crowded the furnishings. I edged out her organs, her swollen heart. I grew up and out so large that I became a woman wearing my mother's skin. So I think that poem is my way of rewriting the mythology as a way of kind of reclaiming this seemingly permanent loss, as thinking about the idea of regeneration. So not just, so if the loss is that, my mother can never have her mother back, maybe the gain is that I'm becoming my mother. Which is scary because she, I love her very much, but she's intense. Well, she's intense. Another thing is she's very cheap. I always say she's the cheapest person alive, but I'm also pretty cheap, so I think it lives on. Okay, so I'll read, I'm gonna read, actually I'm gonna switch up a little bit. So those are just some poems bookending my relationship to my mother and my grandmother and my motherland and the war. And the next set of poems is I'm always embarrassed to read it because like they're about longing over somebody I'm like not into anymore. But like it's like you don't deserve these poems, but they're mine, so whatever. They're my poems, and I want a book award. So, you know, thank you. It's like it's that dual thing. It's like ugh, and then it's like, well, you know, you're beautiful, you know, like. So the titles of the poems are they're all the same titles, and then they have different subtitles. They're called Object Permanence, and you know, I'm very interested in this idea that a child, when you take away their toy and at some point they think that that toy has disappeared altogether, like as long as they can't see it, right? They think like, oh, you know, that's why peekaboo is so amazing to children, because it's like, oh my goodness, you're gone. Oh my goodness, you're back, right? But so they don't realize that you're a permanent thing. You're actually there. But that moment when you realize that that object does exist, even if it's gone. So it's sort of like my metaphor for memory, that something may, or even trauma, like something that may have happened in Vietnam 40 years ago still has a kind of permanence as a story, and also as kind of like the remnants of sort of the after effects, like the way that my mom still dreams of the war, like I said, you know. But this is about the person that doesn't deserve these poems. But I dedicate this to you guys because I feel like, you know, at some point in your life you're gonna be with somebody or long after somebody who doesn't deserve it. But the point is really my longing, and my friend in a workshop once said, like, longing is the distance between, he probably stole it from someone else, but it's like great. Longing is the distance between what you want and what you can have, right? So it's like actually longing, like that long distance. Oh, okay, object permanence, camera obscura. I watched in the dark your face like something click shut. Shutter and aperture, pinhole of light. You opened your mouth, but nothing came out. I searched the room for a prick of light, saw your face, and something clicked shut. Your odd proportions, this oak wood bar, a flash, panorama, wildflower, and exposed brick. The curl of hair at the nape of your neck. Your body was a trap. A sound escaped. Your voice was low, then click, and everything inside snapped shut. Object permanence after Spicer. I am thinking of a summer day in July, under a strong sun, the waves riding slowly to shore. Yesterday and the day before are artifact. The proof is in the waves. Hash marks accumulate. The days accumulate. A summer of no love wants to accumulate into something greater than us. I split 2 coins, ended with 2 halves, a multiplied separation. Fused my knuckle to my cheek. Sat waiting all summer. Memory. I say summer and arrive at his lips. I want to strip the significance, put it in a museum, behind walls of glass, a hand, a torso, knobs of muscle. If memory were a suitcase, mine is overstuffed and spinning on a carousel somewhere in New Jersey. New Jersey or the flight of the moon. The scattered light, my bright face like crushed glass, floating on the ocean's bent surface. The sea. The mercury levels were rising. We drove to Mexico to buy cheap shellfish. We huffed gasoline, entered the atmosphere, watched numbers drip down the screen. The patterns were indiscernible. I stepped out of the car into a glade of honeysuckle, followed the footpath to the beach, braced against a wave, took in a mouthful of sand. I want to be this simple again, a body diving under while the waves scan over. I glided over debris, over beds of kelp. After rain, colors arced over a green field. It was a sun-warmed landscape. It was steeped in gasoline. I thought my heart was in it. Imprint. So yeah, I'm on the West Coast, so this is all like me looking out at the ocean, feeling bad. Okay, so here's some more. The clamor of the Pacific rises in waves. Love is whole and unsmashed. I am 3 again, too dumb for memory. A snapshot, projector spinning film, my brother in overalls carrying 2 cans of beer. A green park, my mother's black hair, my father in a white t-shirt. Love is not an ornament, despite the shards, or love is precisely an ornament, since it is hollow. Things that are inside, marrow and tibia, joint and gristle. Things that are under, a picture, a postcard, portrait of a landscape, a city on fire, his startled face clearing under the waves. Okay, this is the last one in the series. So I'm like in San Francisco, like feeling sad. So like it spans like from Brooklyn to New Jersey to like the West Coast. All right, so it's coast to coast sadness. All right, last piece. Landscape. His lips, Sonoma County, bridge lights strung up like Christmas. Pain is a red bar light or the sun filtered through a shut lid. He was almost an emotion, but the room was empty. I wound like bougainvillea around his body. Overhead, a black sky and black trees. The specter of lights dapples the shore. Don't deserve it. Okay, so I have one more poem he doesn't deserve, and then I'll have one final poem. But thank y'all. Okay, so more. I wish I could just say his name and just like throw black paint on it, you know? Okay. I'm not bitter. I'm just like, you know, like what's in the past is in the past. Okay, so this is more mythology. This poem's, say that again? We've all been there, right? Been there. We all been there. Okay, so the last poem is called Pomegranate, and it's also like I think about mythology a lot and the idea of mythology as archetype, and then you go in and then you put yourself in it, then you like grab it, and then you like make it all your own and change it up and think about what did it originally mean. So back to Persephone. Actually, like if you look. The story of Persephone sometimes is also called the rape of Persephone because the rape, if you look at its etymology in earlier meanings, iterations of the word, it actually means to be abducted, right? So to be abducted or carried off. So, I mean, that kind of figures in the book, but I just wanted to mention that sort of like imagining this like self as Persephone, what does that look like? So, pomegranate. I open my chest and birds flock out. In my mother's garden, roses flare toward the sun, but I'm an arrow pointing back. I am Persephone, a virgin abducted. In the underworld, I starve a season while the world wilts into the ghost of a summer backyard. My hunger open and raw. I lay next to a man who did not love me. My body a performance. His body, a single eye, a director watching an actress, commanding her to scintillate. I was the clumsy acrobat. When he came, I cracked open like a pomegranate and ate 6 ruddy seeds. I was the whipping boy. I was thorny barbed wire wound around a muscular heart. They say you can't end a poem on a heart, but I do it like 10 times in this book. So also I think of like, oh, gory, thorny barbed wire wound around a muscular heart. I grew up in a Catholic tradition, so like you have the Sacred Heart, is this image of a human anatomical heart. It's not even like a cartoon heart. It's like you went in and grabbed it out of someone's chest, you know, and then it's wrapped in a crown of thorns, and it's on fire, and it's lanced, and it's bleeding. But to me, it's like not only this idea of suffering, but like divine, exalted, you know, transcendence. So I think about like the endurance of the body, even despite, you know, terrible past person who broke it, you know. Okay, last poem. We're gonna do this. Yeah. Okay, and then we're gonna scroll down. Okay, so this poem is I call it. I need to change the title. I call it Poem for Ferguson, and I want it to be a tribute to Ferguson. But what I was really thinking about was the idea of authority and the idea of power and like times in my life or times in my parents' life where and in our sort of like news, like, or times in all of our lives when sort of like we feel empowered or disempowered. So. Okay, close that. Okay, try this. So I grew up also in Long Beach, California, so the LBC. Okay. Once in Long Beach, when my mother said no English, the solicitor told her to go back to the jungle where she came from. She taught me the names of flowers. Years later, I learned their names in English: narcissus, rhododendron, chrysanthemum. Those words place me firmly in this country. Though I slipped from one language to the other, amphibian. Once as a child, I coughed and ear ached and cried in a new home. Tora, Tora, Tora thundered on the television. Warplanes dropped bombs like so much weight. My parents slept in that blue light. Their eyelids shuddered. I imagined that light to be another country. What do men see when they say ni hao and konnichiwa? A police officer once aimed his eye up the length of my leg as I descended the subway stairs. What could I do with my body then? If I inscribed a circle around me, could I make a country of myself? When I was a girl, my mother was arrested and placed in a cell. The officer did not cuff her in front of us because we surrounded her like small animals, reciting the tricks we learned at school. In Vietnam, soldiers called my grandmother Mama San. She was a lucky one, just one lost daughter, and grandchildren who grew limbs in another country where they spoke in the language of soldiers. Their eyes shone with the milk their motherland could never afford. Today, I sing the same songs, chorus of my mother's losses, my father, a soldier in a long ago war. My brother's voice ricocheting through the phone line on October 10th, where he was held at gunpoint in Liberty Park. Don't tell Mom, he says. He wears a black bracelet etched 1010 to remember. Now Ferguson awaits its verdict. On the street, the eyewitnesses, in the cold room, the autopsies, in the courtrooms, diagrams, and Mike Brown's face, and the faces behind the shields, the officers in riot gear. Soldiers touched my mother's hair. My great-grandfather was cut down by an American plane. The soldiers did not know who my family was. My mother says in Vietnam, a life means so little. In America, lives are worth more. If smoke is a prayer, I watch its dark rise. if prayers are a way into memory, let me construct a burning image. Let my voice go hoarse. Let me light these damn words on fire. Thank you.
One more time for our distinguished poets, Matthew Griffiths, Jonathan Gilman, Cathy Linh Che. All right, so I don't think we have time for question and answer. We're running over and don't want to overextend our time. But I do ask if you want to talk here, the boys, please come up afterwards. Questions, they would love to talk. Or if you have any kind of questions, any personal questions. Again, thank you for coming out, and see you next time. April 22nd is the last one.